Good day and welcome to Psychology with Sal. I am Mr. Sal, your host for today's session. In today's episode of Psychology with Sal, we'll be discussing developmental theories, specifically Piaget. We're going to start with a formal definition. The formal definition of developmental theories are the series of age-related changes that happen over the course of a lifespan. This is courtesy of Spark Notes. In everyday terms, people learn in stages, and those stages influence how and what we are able to learn. The how and the what are what's important. So developmental theories explain how we learn and what we are able to learn at the varying ages we progress through in life. As we move on, also this Prezi will be posted in Edmodo and on the Wakelet for you. We're going to deal with Jean Piaget, cognitive psychologist. Whenever I was going to college in the 80s, he was big in educational psychology. Not like physically huge, but most of my courses evolved around him. His life and times. He was not known outside of Switzerland until after World War II. He did have a bunch of honorary degrees. Remember, psychology is relatively new, so there wasn't a lot of traction, if you will. There wasn't a lot of information out there. This was a new social science. So you can see the honorary degrees. What this means, people dug his work. People liked what he did and believed in him. His theories, his ideas came from studying his daughters and watching them develop and learn as they grew up. Now, some of this cognitive development, things we're going to deal with while we discuss. All of these, as I pause this here for a second, his theory has 4 stages. All developmental theories have stages. They vary in number of stages and how the stages work, and whether you have to be successful in one stage to move on to the next. So it's a constant that developmental theories have stages. The stages themselves vary from theory to theory, and we'll discuss that as we move on. As I stated before, his ideas are a major influence in education. Cognitive psychology, psychology of learning is what this means. Pardon my messy handwriting, but it's a bit difficult writing with this stylus on this iPad. Now, moving forward, his key terms. These are in the flashcards. Schema, which is an organized pattern of thought. We organize things into our brain. One of the key concepts is once you learn something, if you truly learn it and put it into your long-term memory, you never forget it. You may lose it by misplacing it in your mind. You may lose it by injury, physical injury to your brain cells that kill off the brain cells that had that information stored, or through disease. But once your brain works in such a way that once information is stored in there, it is, and it's truly stored and learned, it's not forgotten. That's the concept, and we'll talk about that briefly here in a second. Assimilation. Assimilation is using existing schema to deal with new situations. So you're taking new information, tying it into things you already know, and it's helping you learn more quickly. Learn how to tie your shoes. If you know how to tie your shoes, you go into scouts or something else, or start working on a boat. You learn how to tie knots. You have a basic concept. As we work through life from a very early age, you start building blocks of information into your learning processes, and everything that you learn here moving forward, you tie into old information that you've already learned, and you understand it better. Accommodation, on the other hand, is when you get information that you can't tie into existing information. In some of your classes, if you're learning a foreign language, some foreign languages are very different from English. So you have to kind of start over. It's accommodation. You're taking this new information and starting its own track of information, storing it in your mind. It's not something that you can easily tie into English. So accommodation is when the new information and new situations don't tie into anything already known. You have to start all over again. Pause here for a second. So the concept is that your mind, your brain, is like a series of file cabinets. These are file cabinets. And we have the little labels. This might be school. This might be hobbies. This one might be sports. This one might be music. So as we get information, put a musical note up here. This information gets stored by your brain through learning. It will get stored into the proper we'll put this one up here, will be creativity. This new information gets stored in the proper areas. What happens when we forget things, sometimes this information, because we're not paying attention or we're multitasking, this information gets stored in the wrong area. And we learn it, but we forget where it's supposed to be. Music, instead of being put here into music, we store it in another drawer, another part of our mind, and we forget where we put it. So when you forget things, sometimes you either A, don't learn it, or B, you don't learn it properly. You tie it in with the wrong information. And instead of, you know the information, but you just can't figure out where in your mind it is. That's one of the theories that they've gone over. I learned way back in my college days and through my current readings. So we're going to pick up with the 4 stages of Piaget's theory. This all corresponds with what's in the e-text. Sensory motor stage. It's this first stage. Birth to 2 years old. You sense things overthinking. You're very egocentric. Egocentric means you are self-centered. You're a little id. We talked about that under Freud. Everything, not necessarily an id from the standpoint of all you do is want for it's me. It's you understand the world through what you see and what you experience. You can't understand the world outside of your own perception. children at this age learn through sensing over thinking. That's why like little babies are always, and little kids, toddlers are always putting things in their mouth. They're always grabbing things. And we were always constantly telling kids, don't do that. Don't put that in your mouth. Don't touch that. But that's how they learn. So the way our world works with the way children learn kind of clash, which is a bit problematic. But the first stage, we sense over thinking. So little kids are always listening, always looking, always touching, always putting things in their mouth. At sensory motor stage is the initial stage of learning. Birth through about 2 years, all of these stages for Piaget and actually even the other theorists adjust. They can have, they can end earlier, they can go a little longer. It's just natural. These are ballpark figures, if you will. So this is the first stage. Our next stage is the pre-operational stage. And that is approximately 2 years to 7 years old. Symbols are recognized. Okay, so the pre-operational stage. I apologize for the pause. You're not going to notice too much of it, but I do. I can't scroll around on the screen like I want to on the Prezi here in TouchCast, so I have to pull this up on my computer. The pre-operational stage, it's the second stage of Piaget's developmental theory. It's from 2 to 7 years old. Symbols are recognized. And some of those symbols are as follows. Words. We start getting a vocabulary. We learn, kids will learn what McDonald's is, but they won't be able to spell it, but they'll recognize the sign. Same with other Walmart, Subway, Giant Eagle, hot dog shop. Numbers. As I misspell numbers. We get into addition and subtraction. So little by little, we start building. We go from a visual sensory learner into understanding, starting to think symbols, hands-on learning, still using visual cues and audio cues, but we're starting to be able to process information in our head slowly but surely. So that's the pre-operational stage. Now the concrete operational stage, which is the third stage of Piaget's developmental theory, ballparks from 7 to 10 years old. You start to grasp formal logic. Your problem solving improves. You're able to figure out problems without having to physically do without having to physically work everything. You still will do a lot of working through and not doing a lot of mental in your mind, but you'll work it out on paper. You'll play things out. You'll puzzle things out. But your problem solving improves. You're not just working through your own experiences. You're able to pull and address information that you haven't formally experienced. The concept of conservation. Occurs. That's a concept where quantity stays the same even with a different shape. A milk jug, people have, tall, narrow beaker with liquid in it, and then a wide beaker. We'll put some water in there, which contains more, and they're the same. They're just shaped differently. That's when we start understanding things of this nature, where we get these concepts where we can start making comparisons between things that look different, things that act different, and build upon that. The last stage of Piaget's developmental theory is formal operations. It's the fourth stage. With formal operations, it starts ballpark around 11 years and older. You begin abstract thinking. You can map things out in your mind without having to write them down on paper, without having to work them out physically. You can problem solve, doing math problems in your head, thinking things through. If you make decisions, what are the possible outcomes without actually having to make the decisions? You can work through in your mind and get the information down and figure out the possible outcomes as to what would happen if you make these decisions. Metacognition starts. Metacognition is understanding how you learn. And that's a very important concept. If you understand how you learn, we've talked about this in class. If you understand how you learn, you can learn better, you can streamline things. It's not about how hard you work, it's how well and how efficiently you work. The key concept with this is not everyone reaches this stage. Some people get stuck in concrete operations. Not everyone learns and achieves formal operations. It's very critical. It's very key. It's a higher level of thinking. Not everyone can do it. It's just how it is. This next little segment is things Mr. Sal missed. And we have the tiers because Mr. Sal forgot to go over these. We're going to add these in for Piaget. One such term we forgot was object permanence. Object permanence means, and this usually occurs, hopefully it occurs in the sensory motor stage, which, what age limit is the sensory motor stage? Birth to 2 years. Very good. Birth to 2 years, sensory motor stage. Hopefully infants and toddlers in that age learn that objects continue to exist even if they can't be seen. So like when you cover your eyes up, little kids cover their eyes when they want to hide because if they can't see you, they figure you can't see them. That's where this object permanence comes in. They realize even though they can't see an object, be it a toy, be it food, be it a pet, be it a parent, even though they can't see them, they still exist. So that's where object permanence comes into play. One thing we didn't talk about before, but we will get into here now. Let me grab where we're supposed to be. We talked about pre-operational stage symbolic thinking, using symbols, pretend play. Pretend play happens after 2 years in the 7. You're still thinking concretely, still, kind of locked into their own experience, but they are able to start using creativity and going beyond what they normally see. So pretend play is a big thing. Scrolling down through, I'm actually on Very Well Mind, looking up some of my notes. It's a good resource. And that pretty much takes things up. I think that's all we missed under. We've talked about schemas, we talked about assimilation, we talked about accommodation. Ooh. Equilibration. We'll talk about that here in a second. Let me write that down and I'll come right back to you. Equilibration. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Think about, how can I say this? Think about Freud. Your 3 parts of that make up your personality, your id, ego, superego. Id pulls you one way, superego pulls you the other, and the ego tries to balance everything out. Equilibration, that is the balance between assimilation, we cannot abbreviate that, and accommodation. That one we can abbreviate. Equilibration is in the middle. It balances out when you learn information from having to rebuild and start from scratch with new schema, or that's accommodation, or assimilation when you're taking new things and building into previous knowledge. Equilibration is the concept where your body, your mind tries to balance between the two. It understands there's going to be new things you have to learn. You have to start over. And then there are things that you could tie into information you already know, which is assimilation. So equilibration is a new word that will be added into the flashcards later today. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at dsalvucci@nbasd.org. This will be posted online. I'll send out the email for you guys. Hope this helps. And we'll push out some more information either later today or early tomorrow. Take care. Bye.